Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek and a miscellaneous VR video dealing with the direction of the channel, current, future, and 3 months of Vive/Rift ownership. What are my thoughts? Have they changed? Additional observations, concerns? We'll get into both of those. Going to have that in the timeline if you want to see one, not the other, neither, close it now. But if you want to see one over the other, like I said, in the description below. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the channel and give you guys an absolutely non-patronizing thank you. This channel has been freaking amazing for me. The quality of the comments, the feedback, the discussions, I get 10 times more. And I know it sounded, I said this in that other video when we talked about 1,000 subs, but I want to drive that point home one more time. I get more out than I put in. Like what I get from product reviews, you guys talk about stuff I missed, things I might like, games. I don't think I would have played the single best VR experience I've had to date, which was in raw data, believe it or not. That was the game made me feel like a freaking futuristic robot killing assassination/hacker unit, right? It was awesome. I would not probably have tried it because I just assumed, wave-based, I'll get to it. Not that I didn't like it, I just would have put it off. I know me, right? So the fact you guys hammered that one was awesome because as a result, I didn't miss out. Chair in a Room, same thing, all caught up on that. Awesome game too, by the way. But yeah, the quality of feedback, the comments have just been amazing. And the benefit of that for both of us, I think, is the growth. Like it's really been growing fast. And I had zero expectations on growth. I'm just enjoying what I do, right? The fact that it's growing at the rate that it's growing is just icing on the cake. It's freaking awesome. And yeah, I just hope to be doing this for many, many more months, hopefully even years. Let's just hope VR sticks around, right? When I made the switch to mostly VR content, that's when all the good things happened. So in terms of the direction of the channel, and that's why I bring it up, I'm going to continue with the VR stuff. That's not to say I won't do other things, but the focus is virtual reality. Like I put on the channel art page, it's VR news, games, miscellaneous, discussions. That's the primary focus. Could I split that off at some future point? Maybe, but I'm not even thinking that far ahead. I'm just enjoying now and kind of the near future where I want to head to with the channel. So expect always a daily news video. That's something I'm going to set in stone now. There might not always be a lot to say, but there's usually something to say, right? So I will try always for a daily news video. I'm going to try at least 2 game videos per week. And the only reason I haven't released more game videos is because of the quality. I just wasn't happy with the quality, and I'm still not with some of those. So I've reshot, re-edited, and the first batch of those are going to come in via the scheduling, YouTube scheduling, when I'm in New York next week. I will have, hopefully, news videos. And the reason I say hopefully is the hotel that we're staying at, which is near the United Nations building, none of the hotels around there have Wi-Fi. It's wired only. And it probably has something to do with security. And if that's the case, hey, no problem. I get that, right? You want to be safe? No problem. I just found it strange. If it wasn't because of that, this large city didn't have wireless, but it has to be the security. That's the only thing I can think of. So they offer wired for a fee, but if it's really dodgy and crappy, well, we'll just see. We'll find out. But there'll at least be the gaming videos on those days and hopefully the news. But the goal is 1 news per day, a couple of gaming per week minimum, and then the miscellaneous and reviews kind of as stuff comes up and as it happens, right? So there's things to count on and then things that'll just be situational. That's the goal with the channel. That's kind of what I want to do, is keep doing the news, keep doing games, miscellaneous, hardware, and all the points in between. As for 3 months of Rift and Vive ownership, let's talk about that now. So here we have them, the culprits. And you gotta admit, guys, like, and what's funny is I realized this is actually the second take I've done of this specific video, but this is the first time, really the second, but the first time, that I've held these up against each other. Like, I've owned them for, what, 2 months now, a month, 6 weeks for the Rift too, right? I've never actually put them side by side, which is strange because that you would think would be the first thing I would do. No reason for why I haven't, I just haven't. But now that we're doing that, it's pretty obvious that the Vive is the sexy beast here. Like, she's a sexy gal, right? She really is. Look at that. Just the nice contours versus the simple but very effective Rift design. Now, let's talk about some of the stuff that I talked about with my initial observation. So I'm actually going to go through the list. So for the Vive, I listed pros as being the Room VR, Chaperone, horizontal field of view, Vive controllers, easy to configure for vacuum fit on face, ability to eat, drink without removal of HMD. Those things all kind of still apply, right? Nothing much to add to that. The cons I had were the cable weight, bulkier and heavier HMD, and the depth of field. All right. Has that changed? Unfortunately, no. Elite Dangerous, however, is really the only game that the depth of field issue is noticeable. And that's why I'm pretty convinced it's a software, not a hardware issue. Meaning, the fact that a space looks like a painting hanging 20 feet from you, you don't get that in House of the Dying Sun. You don't get that in Eve Valkyrie on the Vive. They all have deep recessed space feel. So I'm fairly sure that's, that it's a software issue, not an innate hardware issue with this, right? And we'll get back to this in a second, but let's look at the Rift real quick. So the pros that we had for the Rift were minimal cables, lightweight HMD. I talked about it being nowhere near as hot for like a longer duration, right? Minimal screen door effect, better depth of field. And then some cons I listed were no VR and Chaperone, gamepad being the only device, and face positionally not as easy to adjust it on your face. Okay. All of those points are still valid, but let's flesh some things out now that we've used this for a while. So the Vive still has that vacuum fit, and it has it hands down to the point where with this faux leather, which I'm also getting for the Rift, by the way, I can completely block out all light. It's dark as night, right? Dark as a country sky, which isn't very dark because you got more stars, less light pollution. Forget about that analogy. Let's move on. The Rift, same thing, okay? The Rift has elements of its design that I wish the Vive would copy. The headphones. I'm not the best judge of audio, being pretty tone deaf, right? But this one sounds really good to me. So I would not be surprised if the next incarnation of the Vive includes some kind of headset, right? Because I think the Rift is going to benefit from some of Vive's things and take those into account too. Like, I have a real sneaky suspicion there will be some kind of front-mounted camera or enhanced take on the Chaperone system at the very least if they don't do a camera for their next incarnation, right? But the cable thing, when I talked about the bulk, that still applies. It's still heavier to go with the Vive, right? There are those solutions like the dog leash 360 thing hanging off the ceiling. There's all kinds of cool things that I still want to build and try stuff like that. Like the next little do-it-yourself project that I have before the backpack VR unit even is a VR arena. And I'm going to build it with PVC pipe. I'm going to have foam inside it because the hardwood floor sucks for kneeling, doing all that kind of stuff. If it was carpeted, it would be different. It's not. So a light foam, PVC for the border, big enough so that you don't trip, but you can still feel it for the perimeters. And because I'm using plumbing PVC piping, I can build up the sides somewhat, like my own real chaperone system, and thread a cable through that coming out the top. That's kind of my idea with the Vive, is a self-contained little arena that I'm going to execute probably when I get back from New York. But I think it'll work well. Now, back to these here. Screen door effect I talked about. That's still the same. More noticeable on the Vive than it is on the Rift, okay? God rays, more noticeable on the Rift than the Vive. See all this give and take, right? You definitely notice the God rays in Elite Dangerous on the Rift. You don't notice them as much on the Vive. But on the Vive, text near the perimeter, and this, I believe, is a hardware limitation of the lens and like primarily the lens design that the Vive uses. Text near the perimeter is blurrier. With the Rift in Elite, for example, using that same game, text at the center is as crisp pretty much as text near the perimeter. It's way more consistent. And that's using super sampling, right? When I commented in the first video about this looking a little washed out, I take that back. Ended up being a gamma setting. They're both very equivalent. They just have different default settings. Once you tweak them, they're pretty the same, right? There's not much of a differentiator there. But less bulk on the Rift, but less bulk goes along with not having to really use it, so you don't benefit as much. I find the Rift's foam, it's that insulating style foam that you can buy at Home Depot that I use to build a couple of these. It's not comfortable on my face. It almost has a really low burning feeling, right? Like a chemical peel type feeling. It just doesn't feel good on my face. Whereas the foam from the Vive, no issue. So I've ordered the faux leather for the Rift as well. Other than that, if you're talking seated versus room VR, it's a no-brainer. This wins out. I play all my room VR games with this, or any game where I'm going to be standing and not seated. Unless I want to try it specifically on the Rift to compare, and I've done that. But I use this Rift almost exclusively with seated games, right? And for the reasons that I mentioned, it's just better for most seated stuff. There's definitely overlap. I could use the Vive for that and vice versa, right? The biggest thing, look, if you put me in a corner and you forced me to choose, like that horrible question that a parent hopes to never have to answer, which child do you pick for one to survive, right? If you were sending me to a deserted island, you gave me a computer, power generator based on current and satellite internet, you see I've got this all thought out, and you forced me to pick one unit, I would pick the Vive. I would pick it. But that's not to say I don't love these both. I do. But as things currently stand, I would pick the Vive. But all it would take for the Rift, for me to pick the Rift, is something as simple as just supporting Room VR and coming up with their own chaperone system with the touch controllers on their next iteration. And I'd probably reverse that decision, right? So there you have it, guys. That's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions on either the direction of the channel or HTC Vive and Rift 3 months later. Other than that, have a great one, guys. And as always, cheers.